1. Every third weekend in March, a small Midwestern town hosts a tractor pull. I'm not sure what exactly happens at this event, but it goes on for 2 or 3 days, starting at 9 a.m. and continuing into the wee hours of the morning, only to start again a few hours later. This event has been going on for decades and attracts a large crowd every year. In 2009, several community members got together and built a small hotel, 26 rooms, and formed a board of directors to manage it up until April of 2022. Then they sold the property to an experienced hotelier with other properties in nearby towns. One of these properties was a budget chain hotel, and had been the go-to lodgings for guests of the event prior to the new hotel being built. To clarify the setting, the tractor pull is hosted at the fairgrounds. Small hotel is less than a quarter mile from the fairgrounds, and the next closest hotel, chain hotel, is 30 miles away in a different town in the next county. I was hired in early February 2023 to work as the general manager for a small hotel. With no experience in hotel management, but I was hopeful. I'll have to work the desk quite a bit, but it's a sleepy town miles from the nearest interstate, and I've worked in reception at much busier hotels. What can go wrong? A month and a half later, I got my answer. The hotel was booked solid for all 3 days of the tractor pull, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and had been like that, I was told, since the owners purchased the property. The previous manager had handled this event in the past, but she retired before I started, so I had no idea what to expect, other than a full house. A few days prior to the event, we began getting calls requesting reservations for the weekend, which we had to decline. These callers would often request to make reservations for the following year, this year, which I gladly accommodated as we had few reservations in our system for that weekend, this past weekend. On Thursday, as guests began to check in, they also wanted to make reservations for the following year. Some of them even wanted to make reservations for 2025. I complied gladly, naively. By the end of the first evening, we were fully booked for 2024 and halfway booked for 2025. Our waiting list for 2024 was filling up with the names of a few slightly disgruntled guests who didn't get a reservation. But for the most part, they were understanding, and I had made reservations for 2025 for those who requested them. A few guests told me that in the past they hadn't been allowed to make reservations more than a year in advance, and they were happy that we were loosening our restrictions. I thought about this and brought it up to one of the receptionists, who had been working under the old management, and they confirmed this was the case. The next day, I decided to quit taking reservations for 2025 and told anyone else who asked that they would have to wait until 2024 to make a reservation. The rest of the weekend went about as well as it could. A few complaints about basic hotel things, our subpar, read standard continental breakfast, many clogged toilets, a child who somehow vomited all over 2 beds and a nightstand, not to mention the carpet. But everyone survived, and eventually it was all over. Fast forward to this past weekend. We made a reservation for the last available room for 2025 by 11 a.m. on Thursday morning. At noon, a guest came in trying to check in early. The room is available, no problem. He also wants to make a reservation for next year. I'm so sorry, but we're fully booked for next year, but the good news is that you'll be the first one on the waiting list. He didn't like this answer and gave me a piece of his mind, spouting something about loyalty. I apologized, diffused the situation as well as I could, and he eventually conceded. A similar scenario played out several more times during the course of the weekend, and every time I lost a little more faith in humanity. Every one of the other receptionists reported similar complaints over their shifts, and I was called a couple of times to field more complaints. Some guests attempted to reserve rooms for 2026, but I firmly declined those requests. Eventually, Saturday morning arrived to my great relief. A few more guests requested reservations for next year, and I recited the same script I had been reading ad nauseum for the past 3 days. This morning, excited to get back to business as usual, I called my boss to report how the weekend had turned out. We had a chat about all the complaints, and he agreed that we should probably go back to the former policy of not making reservations more than 1 year in advance. As a fun fact, he also mentioned that the chain hotel had rented out 27 rooms to tractor pool guests, more than the entire capacity of small hotel. Not 5 minutes after the call ended, the desk phone rang and I answered.
"Hello, I'd like to make a reservation for next year."
The voice from the other end drawled. "Oh boy," I replied. "When would you be wanting to check in?"
"The 13th, the 14th, the 15th of March."
"Oh, brother." "I apologize, but we're fully booked for that weekend. I can recommend a room at our sister hotel."
"I know you're fully booked. I'm already on the waiting list. But frankly, this is bull. I'm never going to stay at chain hotel again. It's just too far to drive, and you gave away my room."
Once again, I went into my little script and he cut me off again.
"No, that's not good enough. You made a mistake, and you're just going to have to cancel their reservation and give it to me."
I finally spoke. "No, sir. I'm not going to do that." After a little more back and forth, it became clear that A, he was one of the guests that I had personally talked to a few days prior, and B, he believed that he was put on the waiting list and then we allowed others to make reservations, which obviously wasn't the case. I'm not sure how he came to this conclusion, and I'm not sure what made him think that we would cancel someone else's reservation. I also discovered that he had only ever stayed at Small Hotel twice, this year and last year, and somehow he had come to assume that he was entitled to the same room every year, without a formal reservation. He wasn't happy when the call ended, but he accepted that I would call him if we had a cancellation, and if he wanted to attend the tractor pool in 2026, he and everyone else would have to call exactly 1 year in advance. I hope that next year I'll be able to catch a break for this event. I think I would have definitely handled some things better, but this town does not have the infrastructure to support an event of this size, and somewhere along the line a group of people decided that they have the God-given right to a room at this tiny hotel in the middle of nowhere for 1 weekend in March. Hellfreezer's note: maybe it's petty of me, but people like the gentleman there who was insisting on getting the room. If that was me, I would discreetly just make them perpetually at the end of the waiting list so that they never actually get a room the next year, because quite frankly, you've clearly got no problem renting out these rooms in advance. The place is going to be booked out full anyway, and I don't think you'd miss them. But, as I say, that might be petty of me. 2. Friends, I joined your ranks only for 3 days, but I thought my tale would be of interest. I believe it's a useful object lesson in how you can plan and plan, but it'll fall apart if you don't have the competence to, perform when it counts. Also, more practically, don't go putting yourself in the same physical space with someone who has A, parts on an order, and B, an unhealthy preoccupation with you. Even in a relatively public place, even if it's just for a few seconds, even if they fail in what they're plotting hilariously. Part 1. Our friend Norman. I recently took a part-time front desk job at a local hotel, hired by a seemingly cordial man I'll call Jeff. Jeff's plan was to move me eventually to a night auditor position under the supervision of an accountant called Norman. After an uneventful first day, I met Norman on day 2. Norman has social difficulties. He freely talks about how he views customers only as little pocketbooks from which to extract as much money as possible. He rants non-stop about how stupid Jeff is for putting in a new restaurant he knows will fail, and how he hates the guests and absolutely everybody with whom he works. He's known me for like 2 hours. Yes, venting is a necessary part of public-facing jobs. But this is an absolute non-stop stream of consciousness of hatred against every human on the face of the planet, to someone he's just met. Also hated is me, which Norman expresses by preventing me from doing my work tasks. He rants and raves about how my passwords are too long, and consequently revokes my credentials every couple of hours to lock me out of my work terminal. He keeps trying to convince me that I just keep forgetting them because they're too long and failing. Ha! I'm not falling for your inept gaslighting. Oddly, I never have any password issues when Norman's not there. He's also supposed to teach me a bit about the system, but he can't because he's in love with it, Jeff's words, and responds to any misstep in operation with invective usually reserved for crotch shots. Clicking a box closed, for example, lets loose a bout of shrieking about me supposedly being scared of his system and panicking, at which point I say that we need to call off the lessons for now, because they're counterproductive. He then tries baby-talking me, saying I'm so adorable, when I'm supposedly passive-aggressive to him. He stops this immediately, though, when I remind him that is prohibited by the company's contract's harassment clause. Paternalistic language. Again, first day knowing him, the guy has almost no emotional control and is obstructive and uncooperative at every turn. I try talking to Jeff about Norman locking me out of my terminal and preventing me from working, but I just get a, "Oh, that's just Norman," and assurance that he treats everybody this way. When I discuss the situation with other employees, they say that Norman has had anger issues and behavior issues in the past. Anger, you say? I wonder if that's foreshadowing. It then occurs to me. I'm headed for a position that is A, involved with the hotel's financials, and B, reports to Norman, who C, controls the business's computer system. Within a couple of hours' acquaintance, Norman has taken to screwing around with my login info and blaming me, engaging in behavior the contract defines as harassment, and establishing himself as an out-of-control child. Norman also hates everyone on the planet and doesn't seem to have the social brakes, so to speak, on bad behavior that fully functioning humans do. I could easily see Norman thinking it funny to futz with the financial records and get me in serious professional or legal trouble. After day 3, I decide the risk isn't worth it and call Jeff to resign. I explain the situation, that I wanted to waste as little of his time as possible, that Norman has a problem with me, and that I think that staying on would lead to problems for me. And even if I'm wrong, I don't want to work with someone like Norman. I feel genuinely sorry. Jeff seemed like a nice person, albeit blind to Norman. Jeff again brushes off my concerns with "That's just Norman," but is cordial and promises to have a check ready for pickup next Friday. Part 2. The check is in the mail. I drop by the hotel, and my check isn't where the checks are held. I'm told by the front desk clerk that, Norman is instead holding it in his office, and I can pick it up if I just drop by to have a chat with him. No. I'd called up later to speak to Jeff, but the front desk clerk, a different one, puts me through to Norman instead. I hang up, stating we have nothing to discuss, then call back. But the front desk clerk, again, insists in a shouty manner that I need to have a talk with Norman, who wants, for some unexplained reason, to meet with me face-to-face in his office. The desk clerk refuses to put me through to Jeff. Norman wants to see me, and I'm not being fair in not acquiescing. I eventually do get through to Jeff with a third clerk, mentioning Norman's demand, and explain given the issue I had with Norman, the whole unexplained meeting him thing is not a good idea. I ask if the check can be sent to me, giving my mailing address. Jeff doesn't comment on Norman's request, but does promise to mail the check. A week or so goes by and no check. I call Jeff, and he tells me that the check was sent back because he put the incorrect address on the envelope, because he says he couldn't read my handwriting. This is strange, since, I remind you, he took my address over the phone. I note this in the conversation, but don't press it. Jeff promises to resend the check. Finally, it does indeed arrive in my mailbox. Oh, thank goodness, that annoyance is over. Well, no, the check's enclosed, but there's only pay for 2 of the 3 days I worked. I then remember my first day. I was told that I couldn't log into the time clock because they didn't have a time clock login set up for me yet. I don't think much of this. I've worked jobs without time clocks and never had a problem getting pay. I think, unwisely, extending them a bit of goodwill at this point, that this is just an automated oversight due to the time clock issue. Jeff, after all, saw me and chatted with me all 3 days, and has an office right behind the front desk. He knows when I worked. Well now, Jeff won't pick up or return my calls. I am eventually able to speak with him through a desk clerk, who says that Jeff promises to take care of it. Spoiler, Jeff doesn't. Part 3. Don't go into the basement, you fool! By now it's 6 weeks since I left, and it's apparent that I'm going to have to go in to get some resolution. Before I go, I ask the police if I can visit with an officer, like when you're moving out of an apartment after a dangerous breakup or something, because I have a real bad feeling about Norman trying to set up a face-to-face meeting with me alone in his office, persisting in pursuing contact that I've made clear I don't want. Both police and sheriff, though, tell me that we don't do civil standbys. I just moved back to the area, so I don't have a friend who can accompany me. So, on the police's advice, I take a camera and record, providing appropriate alerts as I go, per state laws on recording. I ask to see Jeff and am let into his office. I sit down, he's seated, we're separated by a desk. He is, for the first sentence, friendly, but then flips in on the "you need to have a heart-to-heart with Norman" train, which he's never advocated before. When I refuse and ask why I haven't been paid, Jeff employs an original deflection tactic. He starts acting utterly and completely insane. He begins flying and flailing around in his seat, faux convulsing and screaming, pretending I am attacking him. "Crazy woman here!" I half expect him to start speaking in tongues. His behavior continues until I deadpan remind him, "Jeff, I'm recording." Jeff then, again, starts with the "please be nice and meet with Norman, he wants to see you" campaign. He also confirms that yes, Norman has been withholding my pay, but claims that he's powerless to stop Norman, despite being his direct superior and the hotel manager. Norman has a problem with me, I remind Jeff, whereupon he screams at the top of his lungs, "No, he doesn't! It's all in your head!" Not 60 seconds later, Norman punched me. How we got there, after "it's all in your head," Jeff started screaming for Norman, whose office is right next door, to handle my pay issue and bumbled out. I'd unwisely followed him into Norman's office simply to confirm what I knew and then leave. I did not see Jeff again. Now, attentive listeners who are more likely to survive a horror movie than I am may note that I am now alone in the office with Norman, which is where Norman has wanted me to be for much of the narrative. It was only upon assembling this story in retrospect that it struck me how much of a "do not go into the basement, you fool" strain there is. I would be more reproachful of myself if it had not turned out totally hilarious. After a brief exchange that this was as unproductive as I anticipated, but at least calm, Norman says that he wants me to stay with him alone in his office for an extended period while he makes a phone call, whereupon he will address the pay issue. I'm obviously not doing this. So I tap the phone, which is on the side of the desk, to end the call. This is when Norman punched me. He was screaming at the top of his lungs about me touching his stuff, but he was extremely quick on the draw. There was no reaction time on his part. Given that he was maneuvering for weeks to have me in his office alone, I have to conclude that he was waiting for me to take my eyes off him for a split second so he could deliver a sucker punch. Now, this was not a little whap, this was a full-fledged punch, into which he put his full body movement across the desk, but still. I should also point out at this juncture that I'm a middle-aged woman, 5'7" and 180 pounds, so I do not have a reasonable amount of bulk behind me. But it should not take much for a full-blooded punch to have an effect on me. Here's the problem, though. Norman has the upper body strength of a toddler. He put his whole body into it. He's shouting like a tough guy, and I think he was expecting this to be a huge haymaker punch, but it hasn't done anything. I'm aware there was a blow delivered, yes, but I'm just kind of staring at where he punched me on the arm. It takes a moment for Norman to become aware of this, but when he does, he petulantly grabs my wrist and tries to shove me. Again, this does not work. He's pushing, but he doesn't have the strength to move me like he wants. Granted, he's trying to shove me from across the desk, so he doesn't have optimal leverage. Instead, he ends up knocking the extremely large monitor he has at the edge of his desk. He has to release his hold on me and comedically scramble to keep it from falling off. At this point, it's extremely apparent that he does not have the physical strength to pull off whatever he was planning, and that his scrawny wimp body has completely failed his nefarious plot. I would have almost felt sorry for him if he weren't a complete creep. Desperately clutching his monitor, which is still slipping off the desk, he shouts at me to get out of his office. I do so, but not before calling him a micro-penis. So the various authorities have been alerted to the various garbage pulled or attempted here. Alas, the punch itself was not caught on camera, but due to Norman's BFF monitor, maybe he was right to panic over it falling. Audio was, but the punch wasn't. A police report was filed to create a formal record of what he did, though, in case he tries ineptly to punch any other employees who refuse continued contact with him. The place employs a lot of young girls. Even if compensation falls through, though, I can't be that sad. I have to say that the entire sad display and destruction of Norman's ego was worth the $90. It's art festival season right now where I am, so if you're visiting, be wary in your accommodations of Norman the accountant, though. Even without knowing your physical condition, dear listener, I am pretty sure you can take him. Hellfreezer's note. Do correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm aware things will vary from state to state. If they haven't paid an employee within a timely manner of them leaving, even if it's only 3 days, they are violating some sort of labor law, right? There's a certain amount of time they have to. So wouldn't the labor board be able to get involved there and step in so that no further contact would be required? As I say, I don't know the ins and outs. I don't know the specific state the OP lives in, so it may be different where they live. But I'm curious, and I would like to hear your opinions in a comment below. 3. I know it has been mentioned dozens of times before, but I feel like post-COVID has given guests all the audacity. I began working for a Schmilton umbrella company known for their hot waffles and 100% guarantee in Massachusetts back in 2021 as a high school student. Important context is that I started working at that property as COVID was beginning to unwind, event and travel-wise, and it was conveniently located between an NFL stadium, which obviously did football and soccer games, as well as concerts, a wedding venue, and the opposite direction there was another concert venue, so it got busy, especially during the summer and fall when events would overlap. People who have worked at property like this, or have at least one trait, know a few things. Wedding blocks, despite being told not to, always had their guests check in the day of the wedding, which was always starting at or around 3, which is our check-in time. So not only did we have to deal with the wedding party getting ready, we had a line out the door of people trying to check in at 10 a.m. because they had to get ready before the shuttles came to get them. Almost all the brides would come in days before, wheeling in boxes of welcome bags, which was made our responsibility to hand out to every room checking in with the wedding block. This is also at the same time we are checking in non-wedding guests, and some people were not attached or booked through the group, so you can imagine it got confusing to differentiate at times. I loved getting yelled at by brides and mothers of brides for forgetting or missing a room. Both after-parties of weddings and concerts meant a lot of drunken guests. The chaos which ensued after the concerts and the amount of hungover late checkout calls we received in the morning were honestly impressive, but that really wasn't the worst part of the property. This one isn't property specific, but as a side note, I'm a young female who again worked during high school and still worked during college, so I too have had my fair share of creepy men, which can be heightened by drunk concert goers. Working 3 to 11 by yourself is no fun when you have to lock yourself in the back. Having worked in this hotel industry for now 4 years, which I know is a relatively short time, boy do I have stories. For example, my first shift working at the desk after the computer training was a Jimmy Buffett concert, if you know you know, and a family including a daughter with her mom and aunt. come back before the concert even started. Turns out the daughter, who was designated driver, had to bring the older two back as they were too drunk. This was evident as 15 minutes after going up to their rooms, the aunt returned back to the lobby completely unclothed, looking for a new remote. The best part was that her issue wasn't with her being unclothed, but her TV not working. I loved that property though. The winters were basically dead quiet, the management was amazing, and always had your back despite the entitled, rude, crazy people, and all of the people I worked with and who I trained made a great team. I unfortunately had to move for college, and that brings me to the property I am at today. I go to school and now work in Virginia, near George Washington's estate, a military base and obviously DC. There are a few types of travelers we deal with here at this same branch of property. Old snowbirds who are either the sweetest couples or the most entitled, cranky old people. Foreign or local tourists, which are usually the most mixed bunch of apples, in terms of sweet versus entitled. Military and government travelers, which once checked in you never really saw. And of course, 8th grade field trip groups. I've only worked at this property since mid-August, but it has taken more out of me than my old property had in the 3 years I worked there. When I first started here, I was the only young new girl, which luckily had experience on the new system, more than anyone who was training me anyways, as well because when anyone besides my front office manager was training me, they sat in the back watching shows for 8 hours as their way of sink or swim. They acted cold to me and on numerous occasions only referred to me as nicknames, which, fine, I know it's just because I'm new, but on top of it all it was exhausting. Not only in the wintertime did corporate decide to drop the rates ridiculously low, to the point we had numerous nightbirds verify, not assuming unfortunately, that would work in the room, but corporate also decided that the water heater issues we were having were not worth the expenditure. This meant that we had an entire, ever-growing section of rooms that were not receiving hot water, and we couldn't do anything about it but pretend we did not know it was happening every time we got a complaint. It was exhausting dealing with the rightfully upset guests and trying to assign rooms around the problem area. I would cry every day on my way home from work because unfortunately the front desk is the punching bag for all the hotel's issues, regardless if it's within our control or not. Fortunately, the water issue is fixed, but that doesn't stop guests who stayed with us during that time to come back and still try to claim there's issues. Without fail, a maintenance goes up, and sure enough, the water is steaming hot. People will do absolutely anything for points and money back. While I have quickly grown the ranks at this job to get in both my GM and front office manager's top employee list, including getting all the gossip of my other co-workers in corporate, I am a full-time student and work full-time, so my only days off from working are full school days. I've gotten to the point where I dread having to go to work the second I get in my car from leaving my last shift, because I think I'm hospitality burnt out. My family is pressuring me to stay with the company as the employee benefits are obviously great, but I spend what feels like all my free time wondering if, when I move back home this summer, if it's worth going back to my old job for them. Unfortunately, I know that entitled and rude people are everywhere, so I cannot avoid them. But man, is it hard to get yelled at with a smile on your face. If you listened this far, you are an amazing human, and if you at all relate, I am so sorry and we have got this. Hellfreezer's note, never worked in a hotel, but I did do a public-facing job, and I totally feel you about getting all the blame for all the problems of the company. It's not acceptable. It's never going to be acceptable. And if you have an option to do anything other than go back to that, especially if you can do something where you don't have to deal face-to-face with people constantly complaining as if it's your fault every day, do that. It really doesn't matter what your family thinks. They're not the ones doing the job. They don't have a say in the matter. You've got to do the right thing for yourself and your own mental health. Because mental does affect the physical. Believe me, I know. 4. About a month ago, some folks decided to call on a Saturday afternoon and book a room. Now, firstly, I'm always wary of locals booking, but sometimes they book a room to let their kids go swimming, etc. So while I was getting nickel and dimed by Mrs. A over taxes and incidentals, apparently, her boyfriend was booking online. Unbeknownst to him, it was a third party because why read what you were doing? About 40 minutes later, I got a call back from Mrs. A saying she had to cancel. I offered no charge, as the first interaction on the phone led me to believe they would pull something like this. I cancelled and explained if any holds, which there shouldn't have been, could take 3 to 7 blah blah blahs. 15 minutes later, her boyfriend calls asking about his reservation. It was under a different name, but had his email attached. I apparently explained that he needed to call the 800 number on the mail, while I'm holding his money. I'm the bad guy, etc., etc. It was a family emergency. Oh, the reservation was for my mom, etc. I told him in small words, I don't have your money, contact the third-party site, which I also don't have access to, and enjoy your day. Flash forward 2 weeks and the boyfriend calls back, asking for his refund for the same third-party reservations. He even sent his confirmation email showing it was non-refundable, and he chose not to get the insurance. The best part, it had the 800 number to call, so I took my whole shift to craft an email and play the screenshot highlighted and zooming in, giving the information back to them on who to call. Because of the hassle, they put my front desk team through all names and emails affiliated with 2 reservations in question, which are now added to our DNR list. No reply. Another 10 days later, he calls again, threatening my front desk team. I was off that day, and found out the next. He contacted the 800 number and threw me under the bus. I happily sent all the information back to big corporate. They said, oh well. Then I had a strange feeling. Check the online reviews. Wow. 4 1-star reviews come in the day before from Google. They all came in at the same time. Now I'm going through the trouble of getting Google to remove the reviews. Good luck. Also, they decided to throw me under the bus in each one. They were twisting the narrative to play the victim. The best part is I played detective and found out that they live no more than a 20-minute drive from my place of business. I also discovered, between the multiple flagged Facebook accounts, that his mom is his friend, who I think is besties with Mrs. A, and her best friend got in on it too, claiming we had critters. They all live in the same relative trailer park, Red Hats, Demolition Derby, Mountain Dew, swigging, cross-eyed, multiple baby, daddy, family shrub type humans. And yet they still can't read the damn email. Well, I hope you all enjoy staying at my infested hotel that robs people. However, the other reviews rave about our service. To be honest, if they keep it up, I'm considering filing a civil suit for defamation if it goes further than those 4 reviews. 5. Hello. This all happened last night. I work at a pet-friendly hotel on the side of a highway. My shift was 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And the night was going shockingly very smoothly, which is odd for me, because I am notorious for having the worst PM shifts among my coworkers. At around 10 p.m., a guest comes down our staircase with a pretty big dog who was not on a leash. I was about to ask the guest to please put a leash on their dog, but before I can speak, she exclaims she found this dog sitting upstairs by the elevator all by itself. Now, our policy is that no dog should ever be off-leash without their owner, ever. The policy also states that the dogs will not be left alone in the room, and at my hotel, we have guests sign the rules. I am stunned because where did this dog come from? I look at my paperwork and we currently had 3 dogs on property, 2 of which I had checked in earlier in the night, so I know for a fact it was not one of the other 2 dogs. This dog was from a guest who checked in a few days prior. In the paperwork, the dog was noted to be a service dog. I start to get nervous, as what if there is a medical emergency and the dog was looking for help? I immediately call the room to no answer. I call my engineer to go up to the room and investigate as I call the cell phone number on file. Meanwhile, the guest who found the dog is sitting with them in the lobby. The dog was so calm and gentle. Every guest who entered the lobby, or who was already sitting in the bar, was in love with him. I call the cell phone number 3 times to no answer. I start to worry because I'm nervous that the guest is incapacitated. My engineer comes down after the third call of no answer and informs me that there was no one inside the room and there was dog slobber on the doorknob. This indicated that this dog had escaped and basically wanted to go on an adventure. I am now more confused as I call again for the fourth time, the cell phone on file. My engineer goes and sits with the dog, and I call my manager because I'm unsure what to do. As I'm calling my manager, the guest finally calls back and my engineer answers the phone. The guest apologized and asked if we can put the dog back inside the room and that he was at the airport, which is 45 minutes to 1 hour away, picking up family. He informs us the dog is named Fido, and we can call his name for him to follow as there was no leash inside the room. I got my engineer to watch the desk as I lured Fido back to his room and shut the door. No more than 10 minutes later, Fido got out and came prancing down the staircase. The guests who were still at the bar let me know Fido had returned. Ruff. My engineer and I both agreed if we put Fido back inside the room, he would escape again. So we lured Fido back into our office and took turns sitting with him. I called the guest back multiple times to no answer. By now it was 11 p.m. and my security guard and night auditor walked in. My engineer and I explained the situation to both of them, and both were happy to take over watching Fido. My engineer soon departed, but I said that I would stick around for a bit, and when the owner got back I would speak with him. I sat with Fido in our back room until 12:30 p.m., in which by then, having been at work for 9.5 hours and already exhausted, I confirmed with my night auditor if I can go home. My night auditor was more than happy to watch Fido with our security guard until the owner got back. I went home and was still worried about Fido. I barely slept, every couple hours waking to check my text messages for any updates, as my night auditor promised to text me updates. Around 4 a.m., my night auditor called to ask me a question, and also informed me that no one has come for Fido yet, and she called the guest's cell phone at 1:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. again to no answer. She said that her and our security guard took Fido outside to pee around 3:45 a.m. After the call, I laid awake, worried about him. However, I finally fell asleep around 6 a.m., as there was no update from my night auditor. At 10 a.m., I woke up and opened my phone. There was a text from my night auditor informing me that the guest came to get Fido at 6:30 a.m. The guest had apologized and assured us that the dog will not be left alone again, as the guest still has one more night on their reservation. I was annoyed, to say the least, as this person left their service dog alone in a hotel for over 9 hours. This all leads me to today. I came to work at 1 p.m. and my manager was here as she had worked the morning shift. Now, as per policy, we do not charge for service dogs. However, if there is a disturbance from the dog and complaints from other guests, we are to charge the $50 for the inconvenience of others. I asked my manager, since for over 9 hours 4 of the staff took care of this dog while their owner was nowhere to be found, if we are to charge him for the inconvenience. My manager informed me that per the owner of our hotel, in the holiday spirit, Easter, we are not going to charge him yet, nor ask him to check out. I was dumbfounded. My manager had agreed with me that we should be charging the guest, but cannot go against direct orders from the hotel owner. My manager told me she talked with the guest, and he had apologized profusely, and promised he will not be leaving Fido alone at all today. My manager did say that if this happens again tonight to call her, and we will end up charging him. So here we are at 8 p.m., no appearance from my friend Fido. And my shift almost to an end, and the question still haunts me. Why have a service dog if you're going to leave it behind for over 9 hours? Hellfreezer's note. Now, as we know from listening to these stories previously, you can only ask 2 questions. Is this a service dog, and what tasks does it perform? I'd be very curious to know what the answer to that second question is, as whatever tasks it does perform are apparently not that essential if you can leave the dog for almost half a day. My instinct says they might be more of a pet than anything else, in which case they should be charged a pet fee. But if they genuinely are a service dog, then why are they not being allowed to do their job? Suspicious, suspicious, suspicious. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Coahw. That's Confessions of a Hotel Worker, for those who are new, episode 143. And before you go, please do hit that like button. If you'd like early access to these videos, then that's easy to get. You just come over and support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. You get the videos on Monday. Get all those super secret links on the Monday, usually by... You also find links to the Hellfreezer Discord server, and a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store on Teespring. And if you'd really enjoy today's video, then you can leave a tip by clicking on that little heart with a $sign underneath the video. And that is never required, but I do appreciate it. Okay, no other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what's the newest to you musician you've discovered? I recently discovered a musician, very talented young woman called Jade Bird, and my favourite song of hers is one called I Get No Joy. It's a very, very catchy song, good beat to it. But I was looking through, as I often do, I'll look through YouTube for people doing covers, and I came across her doing a cover of, I think it was American Pie, and it was quite a good cover. And from there I found her original songs, and I was, oh, she's actually very talented. She's not new, she's been around for quite a while, but that was my first time hearing of her, and I quite liked her. So why don't you let me know what some of yours are in a comment below. And before we go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video, and this question was in relation to how do you store your kitchen towels? And today's answer comes from Kathy Beckford. I have 3 hanging on the handle of my oven. As needed, I wash them all at the same time and put them back. And that's a perfectly reasonable way to do it. Although, I'd hope you remove them from the oven handle while the oven's on, because fire bad. 3 pretty. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.